Have you been wondering how to build a successful strategy with open source for your company? Or why would you invest in open source projects when you can use the code for free? Are you an open source maintainer on the edge of burnout? Or a newcomer who's too intimidated to take the first steps and get involved? Maybe you're not a code developer and you think that there's no place for you in the open source ecosystem. You're not alone. My name is Ildiko Vancha, and this is the My Open Source Experience podcast, where my guests and I share our open source journeys with all the successes, the struggles, and joyful moments. Find the answers to your questions and dilemmas, and more importantly, join us and be part of the community. Hello, everyone, and welcome back on the next episode of the My Open Source Experience podcast. Today, I'm here with the creator of curl, Daniel Stenberg, and I'm super excited because we will dive into what it takes to maintain a project over 3 decades. But before we do that, Daniel, can you please introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about your tech background and what do you do currently?
Sure. Hi. So yes, I am a software developer since a long time ago. I've been developing software professionally since since the before mid 90s, and I've done open source since almost as long. So that's what I do, and that is what I've done. And I started the curl project then in soon 3 decades ago. And nowadays, since a few years back, I do curl full time. So I do curl every day, all day, as much as possible.
That's amazing. Do you remember when you first encountered open source? Maybe it wasn't even called open source just yet.
No, it was not open. It became open source in '98, right? So I I got a job at IBM in the early 90s, and I worked with IBM's Unix systems. AIX was actually the first Unix I learned and experienced. And during that time, I got to know about, well, free source code. People actually, shipping tapes with programs and source code on. So it fascinated me almost immediately, actually. Just, people giving away huge, complicated, advanced, cool things just with all the source code. Yes, it was good times.
I think it's a probably well educated guess to say that anyone who watches this podcast used curl one way or the other, even if they don't know what the project is, never heard about it, because it's just integrated into so many things. And since maybe not everyone knows what curl is, can you describe the project in a nutshell, what it does, what it is, what it is used for?
I do have a struggle to explain what it is, a little bit depending on my audience, who I'm talking to, because when I talk to regular normals, then the entire concept of internet transfers, even that is weird. What do you mean? What do you do? But curl is a project, and we do primarily two things. We do a command line tool and the library. And the command line tool is called curl, and the library is called the libcurl. And the command line tool is basically just a wrapper around the library. So it is a command line tool to do internet transfers. Internet transfers specified as a URL, uploads, downloads, using one of the 28 supported URL schemes protocols. So pretty much HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, FTPS, SCP, SFTP, a lot of email protocols and sockets and LDAP and Gopher, and 28 of them. Lots of protocols. So on the command line, it is actually most commonly used for HTTP. So uploading, downloading, fiddling with HTTP in different ways. In the libcurl case, it's also mostly used for FTP, but then more embedded in application services devices for doing, well, the same thing, uploading, downloading data for their different use cases. I think libcurl, I mean, nowadays I say that it is installed in 30 billion installations, which is a large number. And it has become that large because we've been around for a long time, right? So curl was renamed into curl. So we launched curl in 1998 and libcurl in 2000. And one of our missions have always been to that we don't break the users, so we don't break existing use cases, neither the command line tool nor the library. So we haven't broken, for example, the library ABI and APIs in 2006, which is now 19 years of. So you can run the same examples from 2006 with the modern libcurl, and it works exactly the same. And that is one of the reasons why it's stable, it's there, it's solid, and we do regular releases where we do everything. And since we've been around for so long, we also had a long time to polish everything. Again, back to that, the reality doesn't work like the specs, so we have adjusted the code to work more with the reality, so you can actually work with regular servers that are around there on the internet, and it actually works, upload, downloads, all those protocols. So all that time, all that stability, the same ABI, the same API, that has sort of made it it's not a standard, but it's a de facto component that has been there since forever. So it's an easy choice for everyone to just use libcurl to do it. And obviously that has worked to a pretty good extent. So yes, more basically every internet connected human uses curl every day, right? Because all the devices, all the tools, everything pretty much these days have curl in them somewhere.
I wanted to ask you to just list a few examples of the use cases, but it sounds like I should ask you to list a few examples where it's not used.
Yeah, so it has turned out the world has really gotten into everything is internet connected these days. So pretty much everything is getting first it's getting powered, and then we get network connected, and when it's network connected we might as well have the internet connection. And when you talk about over internet, it's really convenient to speak a common protocol, right? And a common protocol are almost always one of those 28 that curl supports. So when you have a device that you want to speak to a service somewhere on the internet, it's really convenient and smart to just use an established protocol for that, and then curl is there to do that for you. So it is an easy solution, and it's a smart choice. And also, since I didn't say that, but it also runs on pretty much every operating system ever made, right? So we have 111 documented operating systems that curl has run on, which is a mind-boggling number because it's impossible to even name more than 20. So it's really easy then to just bring that curl to whatever product you do, whatever service, even your next one, and the next and next and next. You can just move on, and libcurl will be there, and you can still do internet transfers exactly the same. So it makes it a pretty solid, safe, easy foundation to build internet transfers on.
Obviously, by today, curl runs on everything and anything that has anything to do with the internet. We kind of established that. But when you started out the project, like 30 years ago, like when did you start to see users and like use cases with the project? And I don't know if there was any use of the project that was at the time like very surprising, or like I did not expect that kind of moment.
It started out first, I just wanted to download HTTP data, right? So it started just with me wanting to scratch my own itch there. And then I found the existing tool, HTTP GET. So I didn't write that first little spark. That was actually written by another guy, Rafael Segula. So he wrote that called HTTP GET in 1996. He released it in November. I actually found it only a few days later, it turns out. That's even before Google existed, by the way. So, and I started with that, and then it didn't really work the way I wanted it to work. So I sort of sent back a few patches to him. We should do it this way. So I already then became that, first community because he was the maintainer. I started contributing to it, and he got bored by that quite immediately because I don't think he wanted to do much. He just put it online, and here's how to do get HTTP, right? Before that I had no idea how HTTP worked. I can't claim that I understood it completely the first few weeks either, but then I sort of got into that. So he said, hey, you can continue this yourself if you want to. So I became the maintainer of it, and I put it online. I mean, the updated versions then after I did follow-up releases to that HTTP GET. And I had users finding that and submitting issues and soon patches as well. That happened really quickly. So we had this, I mean, that was a small community, right? Mostly my friends and a few extended friends pretty much right in the beginning. But it started out like that. So I had people contributing pretty much from the start. I mean, at least the first few months, people were finding bugs because it was so naively written from the beginning. So of course it broke many times because it was, yeah, I didn't know how things actually worked. And back to the, I wrote the IRC bot and doing TCP connections. So I sort of had an understanding of TCP programming and everything, but I was still naive developer in the beginning because I didn't really understand things. And then I already from the beginning, because I had that background already from the IRC bot to make sure that the code would build on many systems because we had a lot of different Unix systems back then. I wrote it on a Unix from beginning, and I wanted it to be possible to build on other Unixes, right? So, and then it became this problem: how do I actually people built it on other Unixes, and hey, it didn't work here. You needed this patch to make sure that it also works on these weird Unixes that we have somewhere over here. So it became a lot of feedback just because we wanted it to get to work on all those different platforms that we had. So it started like that. So I had that community pretty much from the beginning, at least from early 1997 something. And then from there on, it has only grown. It has always existed. So it's a great feedback loop. And I already from that beginning, I knew that this was the only way to make sure that curl would actually run on a lot of different systems, because I personally would only have a very small set of systems to actually try it on, right? So it would never work on more than just a few boxes if I had to do it. So I figured I should, of course, do it open source so that we all could make it run on everything and anything that people wanted to run on. So that was one of the motivations for me to obviously make it open source from the beginning. Also, I wanted to be one of those cool people who actually gave out source code to the world the way I had found other source codes at the IBM in the beginning of the 90s, right? I wanted to be part of that cool team that actually gave away source code like that. So for me, it was given that it should be open source from the get-go.
You wrote the code because of your personal need and interest, and like it wasn't something that you were thinking about from business perspective, and you were also inspired by this ethos of open source and like the free software movement, and you decided that you will put this out on the network and for people to find it and go the open source way. And
yeah, and then the positive feedback loop, right? People said, "Hey, great, I used it; it works perfectly, except for this little thing." And hey, I'm missing out this feature. Shouldn't it do this too? And positive feedback, people using it. Excellent. Of course, we should do that feature. Of course, we should add that protocol as well. And we should, of course, we should. And yeah, it doesn't work. We should fix that. And is it too slow? We should make it faster. It doesn't do that. We should do that. And when people say they like it and they want it to do more, yeah, why not? And if it fits sort of the general goal that we had and the general purpose, sure. And then it just accelerated. And so the first creation of HTTP GET, I had done libraries in the past already. Sort of, I did that already when I started on long before that. So I had the idea of maybe I should just convert it into a library so that other applications could embed the code into their systems. Because I figured, well, if it works good to do internet transfers, maybe other programs want to do internet transfers as well in an embedded fashion. So I converted into a library in 2000, but I already had that in the back of my head, so it was actually kind of easy to do this conversion. And then that really made it take off significantly more because first of all, it was just lucky timing, the entire curl thing, right? In timing with the internet and growth and everything, because in 1996, internet wasn't that big. We didn't have that many internet users in the world. I think I looked back, it was 36 million internet users in 96. 36 million compared to 6 billion today, right? Or 7 or whatever it is. So when I created libcurl, the library, it was a perfect timing because PHP, the language, I don't know exactly how, but they were on the lookout for adding sort of a HTTP, I think, transfer client into their language. So they basically, as soon as I released libcurl, they just adopted it. Hey, we should put it into PHP by default. So, and they used it immediately. So in the autumn of 2000, they had it in PHP already. And that made it take off a lot because PHP was already then a really popular language for users to build websites with. So that helped sort of just deployment and people using it. And of course, people finding problems and people adding things and kept the spiral going.
So do you think that you creating the library and that lucky coincidence of PHP appearing and deciding that, oh, we should just use this one, do you think that was the moment when curl and libcurl just kind of quote unquote went mainstream and just really took off?
I, I think that was the beginning of it. I don't think we had a lot of users, but I think there was a stepping stone that made it possible then. So, and then of course I think I mean, if we hadn't done it correctly, if we hadn't sort of done our part, they would have cut it out again, went with something else. So it would, I mean, it wasn't done with that, but I think it was a good step for us because it got it out there, got it tested, and got it sort of, so we had to polish everything and make it better and so on. So I think that took it out in the world in a really good way. And then of course it followed up with a lot of other things that happened. I think in my head I didn't view it as a big thing that early on in the project. It still felt like, sure, we're still, just a tiny project. No one knows what we're doing. So I think it took several more years until I started to realize that, wait a minute, there are actually millions and millions of users out there.
How did you learn about the curl users? Did you start to look for users, or were they reaching out to you and the project, or a combination of these?
I think I originally thought that people would tell me when they would do fun things with curl because you want to have this community where everyone is sort of friendly and cozy with each other. You would just, hey, we did this fun thing. You should just know that we use curl to do this. Cool. But I very soon learned that that is not at all how the world works, right? People just, since it's open source, it's there legally, they can just do whatever they want. Pretty much, they have to adhere to the license, of course. But other than that, they don't have to tell me, and they don't, right? So most users, they just download curl, or they don't even download it from us. They probably install it from somewhere else, and they put it in a product, ship it, and they're happy. But they don't tell me, and I don't know who's using it. And uh, in a lot of products, it's really hard for me from an outsider to know if they're using curl too, right? So I don't know at all. Um, there was a time when I tried to ask people about it, but it never works because only a tiny fraction of users would ever say. And then, of course, I have started to get questions from people using different products where curl was installed or involved. So then that was a giveaway that this product is using curl, and that is still actually a pretty good way to learn about curl being used in different things. And then over time, actually, companies, I think, have become better at actually adhering to the license, so they actually mention somewhere, usually in some documentation, that they're using curl. There's a license somewhere, and these days that's usually available online. So if I just try to Google for curl license PDF open source, maybe Daniel or whatever, you can find thousands of different license information pages for different products. That's one way to do it. Of course, it's still hard because it's a haystack, right? How do I know which needles are in there? It's really hard to actually know. And of course, then I also have, since a bunch of years back now, I have this collection where I collect screenshots of curl credits in products. And that's also helpful because then people can help me. They can just find curl mentions in products and send me a screenshot. Hey, I found this screenshot in this game, product, car, TV, whatever. And then I learn, oh, they're using it in that. So that is still sort of still the old-fashioned way to find what curl is used in. I had to find it mentioned somewhere in relation to a product or something. Otherwise, I don't.
I remember seeing your keynote at Open Source Summit Europe in 2025, and you were, I think, showing little segments from emails that people sent you because they ran into some problems in the products that or services that they were using, and they stumbled on your email address. Can you mention a few examples? Like, how did these people find your email address?
I well, that's a fun. Often, of course, I don't actually know how they find me because they just email me with a question. So I have to sort of wait a minute. How come you email me about this? But since products nowadays tend to be pretty good at mentioning which open source software products that are included in their products, and nowadays they actually most digital products include a lot of open source, right? So there's somewhere in your car or your phone or something, there's a legal screen with open source licenses, and it's going to contain 500 different licenses, and each license is huge, right? So there's thousands and thousands of lines of legal mumbo jumbo that no one actually really cares about, but I do because I try to find curl in it, right? And I think very often when you go to one of those lists with open source licenses, there are rarely any email addresses in there. So basically, my email address tend to be one of them that are in there, and possibly because curl is with C, it's not that too long down in the list. Maybe, I don't know, but many times they find my email address in one of those lists. So hey, I'm going to email that person about my problem in my car. And for some reason, I get a lot of emails from car owners. So I had people asking me about installing the GPS in their car. I've had questions about point of interest in their GPS application. I had one who asked me about some Hebrew language installs, configs in some car, and all sorts of different questions that are related to the car, right? Because you can feel it. There was some kind of frustration here. The user has a problem with their car. Who do I contact? There's an email address here in my on my screen. I'm going to email that guy. And to me, first understanding what the question is about, because often, that person asking the question, to him, it's clear that I'm asking a question about the car here. Of course I am. And it's an email in my car. I'm going to email. But for me to understand that even talking about the car, that's sometimes a little bit of a distance. And then, of course, I have no idea what they're talking about. I can't help them. And so it's quite impossible for me to actually respond in any way that they are happy with. Or so nowadays I don't even respond, because I understand it just adds to the frustration and anger in the other end, because that's the person with the problem, right? Probably frustrated because if they come to the point that they email me, they probably tried 47 other things before the end, and now they're really upset, right? And here I come. No, I only wrote some code. I had no idea. In one case, a woman emailed me about her Instagram problems, because she found my email address in Instagram. And at that point, I had no idea Instagram used curl. I thought, hey, that's cool, right? That's like 1 billion users. That's cool. She did not think that was cool at all. She said, no, just talk to your friends at Instagram now and fix my account. And I tried to explain to her, I have no idea. I don't work with any of them. I don't know any of them. I didn't even know they used my code. And it took me forever to just convince her about that. I think I convinced her. And then she emailed me back with a screenshot from Spotify instead, which also has my name and email address. And then it's sort of, you've been lying to me the whole time. So you've just hacked my phone. You can see that because your name is everywhere in my phone. So clearly, and then no, I give up. It's too hard sometimes to just talk to them who find me that way.
How many conspiracy theories you must be part of?
Oh,
One
it's so
way or the
ridiculous.
other.
I found it kind of fascinating that you actually found me in both places. You really had to search for it. So yeah, it was.
Yeah, I mean, like you wouldn't expect that you need to explain software and open source that much to someone who was able to find you at that many places, because I have both of those installed on my phone, but thankfully I never had a problem where I really needed to dig deep into them, but I have not seen your email address in there yet, but I should go look it up. This also makes me wonder though, like we're talking about cars. So obviously the car manufacturer or their vendors, one or multiple of them put curl somewhere in the software stack of the car. We talk about Instagram, we talk about Spotify. Have any of these companies ever reached out to you like, oh hey, we're using curl, or did you have anyone working for those companies come and, I don't know, fix a bug or just say something, or have they reached out to you in any shape or form?
I have this great quote somewhere saved when I had a conversation. This is a long time ago now, maybe 15 years ago, when with an engineer at Facebook. When so Facebook is a pretty big curl user, and they still are, I think. Uh, so I shipped a new version of curl, and they had a problem with it. And when you're deploying something at a Facebook scale, that's, if you miss a few milliseconds on transfers and you scale it up, millions and millions per second, it becomes a lot, right? So someone emailed me and said, reported this and had a proposed solution for it and everything. And I think we sort of together came up with a patch. We should, this is probably the fix. And so he replied me back and said, hey, I tested your patch in production and it seems to work. And that felt so good at a place like Facebook at that time. So yeah, I've had conversations with a lot of people at companies like that. Most of them never. I guess primarily because they don't feel a need, they don't see a purpose in doing it. And uh, lately, of course, since I started doing this full time, I've also tried to get them to pay for some support and sustain the project in any way, shape, or form, right? So that I try to make them understand that it's in their interest that we actually survive and keep doing this in 2 years or 3 years or whatever. But so that's rarely works. But some of them are my customers. Most of them are not.
If you had contact to all the companies who are relying on curl, what would you ask them to do? Like, what ways do you think companies could be involved and invest in curl in a meaningful way that would be helpful to the project? Because there are so many ways companies can support open source projects, but not all the ways are what the projects need. So what would curl need from all the companies who are relying on the software to help maintain it?
So I think in general, that's a pretty sort of tough question, right? If you take a random open source project, how do you help this open source project? Because that's not an easy question, just in a generic way, because it depends so much on the project. How do you actually help this project best? Because just there are no silver bullets here. But for the curl project, I already do this as a business, and I already work on this full time. So for me, the clearly the best way for me is for companies to actually pay something for support, and ideally in one way, so that because right now that's what allows me to do this, right? I need food on the table, because otherwise I can't do this. And if I would get a little bit more money in, I could get more people involved, pay more developers to do this. So right now I'm the only one doing this full time, and maybe for the longer sustainability, it should be more than me. And of course, if it would be more than just me, we would be able to do more and better things in the project as well. So I think that was, for me, that's the easy answer. But if money would be sort of, if you would say, hey, we can't contribute money, but we can contribute other ways, then the second best thing would probably be just man hours, a developer or a contributor just spending some time, contribute code, review things that we need to do in the project that we are already doing, but we could spread it out on more people and do it more if we were more people involved.
Are these things like were these two things always on top of the list if you look back at the 3 decades of the project's life, or has this evolved in terms of what in the moment in time, what sort of investment from companies would have been most helpful to the project?
It's if you don't work on it full time, like I did the first 19 years of curl, right? Then it was just a spare time project. Then it's harder to take money for whatever, because then I had a full time job. I can't just increase my work on curl just because I get money, because I have a full time job that I have to sort of keep up with and keep my employer happy. So then in a situation like that, then money might help if I can juggle that somehow, or maybe cut down my work and do more curl in some kind of dynamic way. But that's not easy. In most kind of works, you can't just do that. You have a work or you don't. uh, so in many times that really did not help me. Just putting money on me would not help me. But then perhaps putting getting another developer involved would have been much more help, because then someone could help me so that I could we could get more work done with my spare time hours there, and someone else's hours also added to that would possibly could have made me transition into my job easier or whatever. So I think it's a completely different challenge when you don't work on it full time, because even when you do it part time, you have the same kind of struggle adding money. It's hard to just scale up if you don't have it as a job, or you can hire someone else maybe, but hire someone else, that also needs a substantial amount of money, because hiring someone is not cheap anywhere.
Yeah, and then you have to like that income has to keep coming in. So if a
That's
company would
true.
do like a one-time donation, then you hire someone for like for the year, for example, and
Yeah,
then if they
exactly.
don't do it again, then how do you sustain that?
That's also hard, right? Yeah, you can contract hire someone, but that's also hard, because then you have to find someone that is suitable right now and for that period of time, and then say, hey, we don't have any more money now, now you go do something else. So yes, it can be a struggle, because yes, you want the money to keep pouring in at least some amount over some amount of time, so that you can be sure that you can keep it up.
I'm also curious how you set up and evolved the project. Like at the beginning, you had that initial itch and idea, and you were working on the HTTP GET, and then it became curl. When it was starting to formalize more as a project, like for example, how did you pick a license? I don't know what licenses were available at the time, and how much the license, for example, was a consideration for you to enable the project to become a community that could be sustained over time. I don't know how also like how long term you were thinking at the beginning.
I didn't think long term at all from the beginning. So uh, well, it started out as a GPL project, because that's basically how HTTP gets started. It had a GPL license slap on it. So, and I think originally, um, I think I think it's quite common too. I didn't really consider the license much. I just thought about the project, the code, and what it should do. And then over time, it started to sort of dawn on me a little bit how the license actually affects what people can do and want to do with it. And then I thought about it, and I thought that, hey, if I do a library now, and it's GPL, it's not gonna enable the things I would like it to enable. So I would, in my mind, I think it would be better suited with a different license. And that was around the time when the Mozilla public license was discussed and the first version came out. And I figured that the Mozilla public license was more aligned with my way of thinking, and my sort of my religious belief of how things should work. So I actually switched to the MPL in, I don't remember the years really, but it was early on. So sort of one of the first years I switched to the MPL, and that was fun, because then that because it gave me the immediate insight that I then got completely opposite reaction. So the ones who couldn't use it because of GPL could use it with MPL, but then the GPL users couldn't use it because of MPL. So basically, I went from one license to the other, but I didn't really. I just switched around the problems. So I still I still felt that I wasn't really at home with that because sure it aligned more with how I viewed things, but I at the same time I didn't really because I added obstacles to people and environments that I really didn't want to impose problems on. So I actually added the MIT license as a dual license for a while until we removed the MPL later on. So it is an MIT license, but with a twist because we were. I just have to mention that because it's so stupid. Because somewhere, I don't even recall exactly when or why, but we patched the license text. So it's actually someone changed a few words in the MIT license. So it's actually not entirely MIT license. There are actually a few words in there that are not. I mean, it's exactly the same. I mean, the meaning, the point, the implications, everything is, but it's not the exact same wording, which makes it not an MIT license because it's not completely identical. So in the, the SPDX registry of licenses, it's actually mentioned as a curl license. So I often say that it is an MIT license because it is an MIT in every sort of meaningful aspects of the word, but it's actually not binary compatible with MIT. So it's actually a curl license. I also tend to say that I strongly not recommend doing that to everyone. You should not change the license. It's stupid.
I mean, I assume it was a moment in time that by now is hard to recall when it and how it happened. It doesn't
Exactly.
sound like something that was like planned carefully.
I don't think it was planned. I don't think it was considered much. I think someone just did it for some reason and we moved on. So I also tried and go back and looked at for some discussions around it, but I've never found any. So I think I didn't keep records correctly. And I don't have any recollection exactly of the discussions around it either. So I can't explain it. I can just look at at the data now and see that we have changed it and just,
Wow.
shake my head and say, okay, some things I regret that we have done in the project. Some things I don't regret, but that's one of the things I regret we did. We shouldn't have done that. It doesn't matter much though in the end because it's essentially the same license anyway. So it offers the same freedom for all the users and everyone involved as an MIT license does. So in reality, it doesn't matter. The only thing is that now we can actually call it a curl license, so we can have curl in one more place.
I mean, that's just that's just funny. Probably because I'm not a lawyer. Neither of us is.
Right, and I've never asked a lawyer about it either, and actually I will never do that.
That's fair. So it sounds like that the license in itself can be a journey when someone is creating and building and especially sustaining an open source project.
Yeah.
You had the license at the beginning, the GPL, and then it evolved. Did you also think about things like a governance structure for a forming community, or was that something that evolved in a bit more organic way, just based on how people were coming and going and getting involved in the project?
Yeah, it has just sort of been an organic way to sort of go with a way that seems to work. And since I've been the one sort of pushing forward so much, I've just sort of accepted that, oh, sure, I can remain the captain and I can go ahead and make decisions as long as it feels right. But I don't want to end up back to communication and everything. I don't want it to feel like I'm an evil dictator here, just doing whatever I want. Even though in practice I can do whatever I want, but I also understand that if I would do whatever I want without listening in and giving everyone a voice and an opportunity to speak up, and and also listen to other people's opinions and advice, because then I mean it's back to the fact again that we're open source. Right? If I misbehave and it becomes a stupid project, then someone will just go somewhere else. I mean, they could just fork the project and continue somewhere else without me, right? If I would misbehave. So I certainly understand that that I need to. We have to have a community. It has to have everyone has to have a chance to say their means and opinions. And then of course we could potentially change the way it's governed, but I think it works, and I don't think anyone has any problems. I don't think there's a problem with this. Maybe I'm a little bit biased, but so we've just sort of kept it running as it works. Um, so I wouldn't be against changing it if anyone would have a strong opinion and an idea of whatever we could gain by changing it. So maybe we do that one day, maybe not. I th- I don't think that's our challenges in the project. I think it works because we have also a very relaxed way. So the other my co-maintainers in the project, they have perfect sort of autonomy and freedom to do a lot that they think is fine. And as long as we all just back again, we follow the project general goals and what we want to accomplish, and then everyone has had a lot of freedom to innovate and go their own ways, as long as we're all just generally fine.
When did you start to have other maintainers being involved in the project, like people sticking around long enough that you were like, oh, hey, maybe you could lend some code and make some decisions and just be part of those people who are actually maintaining the project?
That started early on. So I think the first one I gave commit access was early 2000s or maybe late 99 or something. So I got some people involved early on. And that was back in the days when we still used CVS before we switched to Git. So it was um, more difficult time, and also more difficult time to keep credit of who did what. With Git, we introduced this great concept of separating the committer from the author. Before that, we were all just committers, so it was harder to keep track. But no, I've always tried to encourage others to sort of join and become maintainers, but it's always been a struggle. We've never been many maintainers, and one thing is also that sure, now we have a bunch of them. I don't exactly know how many, but there's also this challenge to keep them maintaining too, right? Becoming a maintainer doesn't mean that you actually do anything, right? Or that you keep doing it. You could say, hey, you're a maintainer now, and they say great, and they do 2 commits, and then we don't see them again. They're still a maintainer, at least for a while, but so but yes, I've always tried to encourage the one who are active, knowledgeable, and seemingly want to contribute and seem to understand things and are aligned with the rest of us. Sure, I want them to become maintainers to share the burden and remove us others maintainers as bottlenecks when they want to do things, right? Because why not? So I try to do that, but it's a slow process. I think most people or just happy with not being maintainer because it's easier and just throw in the occasional PR every now and then and not do more. I perfectly understand that too.
How big is the maintainer group in Curl? Like, how many people do you have?
I think we're a little bit under 20. I think we might be 18 or something right now. But if we're talking about active maintainers that are actually like merging code in a, I don't know, 30, 60-day interval, that's less. I'd say that's less than 10.
So there's kind of a bigger difference between those who have the sort of the title and the right to merge code and make some decisions, and then there's the active group who's actually doing that on a daily-ish
Yeah,
basis.
it varies a little bit then over time too, right? Because they're all volunteers here. So maybe they're occupied in other things this year and maybe they will come back next year and so on.
Do you have, or did you ever have like a particular process of people becoming maintainers, or like, I don't know, any write up anywhere or documentation, what the maintainer responsibilities are, any mentoring people ad hoc or in an organized way?
Well, I think most of that is documented these days, since a few years back at least. So it didn't used to be documented. But from my experience, but by the time you offer someone to become a maintainer, they're already in the project to some degree. They've already done a lot of work. They've already communicated. They're already there. So they usually don't need a lot more guidance. By the time they've proven their worth, they've proven that they're above a certain threshold in whatever you want it to be, then they're pretty much home. Then of course there's some we can usually, for example, when I give them the rights to push to the repository, I can just remind them that, hey, this is the process. Remember that we still review everything before we push, even though we can push without it, and stuff like that. And usually that's never a surprise and never actually a necessary information. It's more like me just repeating what everyone is actually already thinking, or more or less the unwritten rules. They tend to be just almost as efficient because that's the way we already do it, right? And back that we mentioned already, leading by example, that's the way we all do. So of course they still do it, and we all do it that way because we all do it that way. So it would be weird for someone to just not do it suddenly, because that would be a deviation. Then we would probably, I don't know, have a discussion or do something about it. So that has never been an issue. And so I think if it comes to like mentoring or guiding people, that's usually much better earlier, before they're close to maintainer. That's more the first PR or something, when they show up the first time, because then they don't actually know curl. They don't actually, sometimes they don't know the language much, and sometimes they are a little bit just confused by the test suite or the CI system and stuff like that. And so I think that's where mentoring or guidance or advice and being friendly and helpful is even more important, I think, to sort of guide them into the project when they start to getting their feet wet.
So it sounds like that having some written information about the process is always helpful. You can point people to it and remind people to it, but it's not necessarily a clear enabler for someone who might be contemplating that, oh, should I stick around this project? Just knowing what the process is, it doesn't necessarily seem like that it helps them jump that bar. It's rather there through their involvement and interaction with people and everything.
Yeah, at least since the general process is not so much different than any other project. I mean, if we would have some special weird rule that no one else has, then of course that might have been a better sort of reason to highlight that particular one. But we actually make it a thing to try to just, we try to be, follow the regular way of GitHub projects doing things, because then it becomes much less friction. It's not a surprise. You just fork the project, write your code, submit the pull request, and that's the way to do it. And that's the way, so sort of everyone who has ever done anything on GitHub before is already accustomed to that. So that's, we also try to just not surprise anyone and just be streamlined and reduce friction and help everyone in the easy route.
Before we depart, Daniel, can you please tell us something about yourself that has nothing to do with tech, open source, curl, and the internet, maybe? Some kind of a hobby or a fun fact that you don't mind sharing?
A lot of my life is curl, and a lot of my curl is my life. Yes, but I do have a life outside of curl too. So fun thing is that, of course, I started curl before I got married and before we got kids. And these days I have two kids that are big now. They're actually 19 and 22 this year. So still younger than curl. But otherwise, I on my spare time, I do a lot of floorball, which is a very Swedish sport. It's a little bit like some kind of indoor, not hockey really, but it's with a floor, and it's a similar game field as hockey, but indoor and with a ball and a stick. So that's I still do that several times a week actually. So that's my exercise.
Oh, cool. I assume you're part of a team, and like, are you doing like tournaments and things, or
Yeah, we're actually mostly doing it for fun, but yes, I'm in a team too, so we actually have games every other week. So yes, we do. Yeah, so that's fun. Yes.
Awesome. I love that. And I'm happy that you still squeezed in the time with everything else to keep up that hobby. That sounds super fun.
Yeah, I actually find it a really good way to just get away from everything else and sort of clear your mind. So yeah, in a good way. I mean, some kind of exercise you have to get into your life somehow. So I think it's a good and fun way to get it.
So every now and then when there's a heated conversation in the curl community, you can go and take it out on the floorball.
Exactly, exactly. I can just uh, be unpleasant to someone in my opponent team. Yes. Opposite
What a good way to handle conflict. And with that, that's all, folks. That was our episode for today. What did resonate with you the most? What new ideas, strategy, or useful tips did you hear today? Or you have a comment or follow up question to ask? Comment on the episode below or start a conversation on your favorite social media platform. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast so others can discover it too. And stay tuned because the next episode is just around the corner.